8-year-old Max Winters sprinted across the parking lot of Rusty's roadside diner, tears streaming down his freckled face, his small sneakers pounding against the asphalt. His heart hammered in his chest as he ran toward the only people he could see, a group of leather-clad bikers lounging beside their motorcycles. "They're beating my mom!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please help. They're hurting her." The afternoon sun beat down on the small town of Pinewood, Oregon, casting long shadows across the diner's weathered exterior. It was a quiet Tuesday in May, the kind of day where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Inside Rusty's, the regular crowd sipped coffee and devoured homemade apple pie, while outside, the rumble of motorcycles had announced the arrival of the Road Warriors Motorcycle Club about 20 minutes earlier. Charlie Bear Davidson, the club's president, a mountain of a man with a salt and pepper beard and arms covered in faded tattoos, was the first to notice the boy. He straightened up from where he'd been leaning against his Harley, a concerned frown creasing his weathered face. At 53, Bear had seen plenty in his life, some good, a lot bad. But the sight of a terrified child running toward a group of bikers was something new. "Whoa, kid," Bear said, kneeling down to Max's level as the boy skidded to a stop in front of him. "Slow down. What's happening? Where's your mom?" Max pointed frantically toward the motel across the street, the Pinewood Inn, a 2-story establishment with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. "Room 12, he sobbed, struggling to catch his breath. "My stepdad and his friend, they're hurting her. She told me to run." Bear exchanged glances with his companions. Diesel, a former Marine with a shaved head. Hawk, lean and wiry with observant eyes. And Vince, the youngest of the group at 32, who already had his phone out. "I'm calling 911, Vince said, thumb hovering over the keypad. Bear nodded but kept his focus on the boy. "What's your name, kid?" "Max," the boy whispered, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "I'm Bear. These are my friends." He gestured to the others. "We're going to help your mom, okay? But I need you to stay here with Ruby." He nodded toward the diner, where a middle-aged waitress had stepped outside, drawn by the commotion. Ruby Mason had been working at Rusty's for 15 years. She knew everybody in town and had served the bikers enough times to know they weren't the troublemakers people assumed them to be. She hurried over, concern etched on her face. "What's going on?" she asked, eyes darting between the distressed boy and the bikers. "Kid says his mom's in trouble at the motel," Bear explained, rising to his full height of 6'4". "Room 12. We're heading over." Ruby immediately put her arm around Max's trembling shoulders. "Come on, honey. Let's get you inside. I've got fresh cookies that need eating." Max resisted, looking up at Bear with pleading eyes. "You're gonna help her, right?" Bear nodded solemnly. "We'll bring her back to you, buddy. I promise." As Ruby led Max toward the diner, Bear turned to his companions, his expression hardening. "Diesel, you're with me. Hawk, watch the back exit of the motel. Vince, stay on the phone with 911 and keep an eye out for the cops. Tell them we've got a domestic situation." Across the street at the Pinewood Inn, Lisa Winters was backed into a corner of room 12. Her left eye swollen shut, blood trickling from her split lip. Her husband of 2 years, Ray Gilbert, towered over her, rage contorting his features as he grabbed her by the throat. "Where's the money?" Ray snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey. "I know you've been stashing cash. Where is it?" Lisa struggled to speak, her fingernails clawing at his hand. "I told you. I don't have any." The second man, Ray's cousin Dale, rifled through the dresser drawers, tossing clothes onto the floor. "Nothing here, Ray." "She's lying," Ray hissed, tightening his grip. "Always hiding things from me." Lisa's vision began to blur as her oxygen supply dwindled. All she could think about was Max, praying he'd gotten away safely, that he'd found help. She'd whispered to him to run while Ray and Dale were arguing outside the room. Her sweet, brave boy. She'd never forgive herself for bringing him into this nightmare of a marriage. The sound of motorcycles pulling into the motel parking lot barely registered through the walls, but the thunderous knock that followed captured everyone's attention. "Who the hell is that?" Dale asked, moving toward the window. Ray released Lisa, who crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. "Don't answer it," he snapped. The knock came again, harder this time, rattling the cheap door on its hinges. "Police! Open up!" Bear's deep voice boomed, nothing like a police officer's, but authoritative enough to cause Ray to hesitate. Dale peeked through the curtains and immediately stepped back. "It's not cops, man. It's bikers." Ray cursed, reaching for the baseball bat he'd brought in from the car. "How'd they know we're here?" The answer dawned on Lisa, even as she struggled to regain her breath. Max. Her boy had found help. The door burst open with a splintering crack as Bear's boot connected just below the handle. He filled the doorframe, Diesel right behind him, both men taking in the scene in an instant. The terrified woman on the floor, the upended room, the two men poised for confrontation. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Ray demanded, gripping the bat tighter. Bear's eyes narrowed as he stepped into the room. "The boy sent us," he said simply, his voice dangerously calm. Ray swung the bat, but Bear was ready. He caught it mid-swing, wrenching it from Ray's grasp with such force that Ray stumbled forward. In one fluid motion, Bear pinned him against the wall, forearm pressed against his throat. "Not so fun when someone bigger comes along, is it?" Bear growled. Diesel intercepted Dale's attempt to flee, blocking the doorway and shoving him back into the room with one powerful push. "Going somewhere, pal?" Outside, the wail of police sirens grew louder as Lisa crawled toward the door, desperate to escape. Diesel helped her to her feet, his expression softening as he assessed her injuries. "Your boy's safe at the diner," he told her. "He's one brave kid." Tears of relief streamed down Lisa's bruised face. "Thank you," she whispered. The police arrived minutes later, finding Bear and Diesel standing guard over Ray and Dale, who sat sullenly on the motel room floor. The responding officers, Mike Crawford and his rookie partner Jessica Chen, took in the scene with professional detachment, but Crawford's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the bikers. "Bear," he acknowledged with a nod. "Want to tell me what happened here?" Before Bear could answer, Lisa spoke up from where she sat on the edge of the bed, an ice pack from the motel office pressed to her face. "They saved me," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. "My son found them. Ray and Dale," she pointed at the two men, "they were trying to get money from me. Ray's my husband. This isn't the first time." Officer Chen crouched beside Lisa, speaking softly as she took notes, while Crawford began the process of handcuffing Ray and Dale. "You're making a big mistake," Ray snarled at Lisa. "Where are you gonna go, huh? You've got nothing without me." Bear stepped between them, blocking Ray's view of Lisa. "She's got plenty," he said firmly. "Starting with a son who'd run through fire for her. Some people would kill for that kind of loyalty." As the officers led Ray and Dale to the patrol cars, Bear turned to Lisa. "Let's get you to your boy. He's worried sick about you." The walk across the street to Rusty's diner felt like a homecoming procession. Lisa, supported by Diesel on one side and Bear on the other, moved slowly, each step painful but purposeful. Hawk and Vince joined them, forming a protective circle around the battered woman. Inside the diner, Max sat at the counter, a half-eaten chocolate chip cookie forgotten on his plate as he stared anxiously at the door. When it swung open, revealing his mother flanked by the bikers, he leapt from his stool and raced toward her. "Mom!" he cried, skidding to a halt when he saw her injuries up close. Lisa knelt down, wincing at the movement, and opened her arms. "It's okay, baby. I'm okay." Max threw himself into her embrace, sobbing against her shoulder as she held him tight, ignoring the pain that shot through her ribs. Over her son's head, she met Bear's gaze, mouthing a silent "thank you" through trembling lips. Bear nodded, his gruff exterior softening just slightly. In his 30 years with the Road Warriors, he'd been called many things, most of them unflattering, but as he watched the mother and son clinging to each other, surrounded by the curious but respectful gazes of the diner's patrons, he knew that sometimes appearances could be deceiving, and sometimes they could be absolutely right. What nobody in the diner could have predicted was that this chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. Especially when Ruby, watching the scene unfold from behind the counter, recognized Lisa from a missing persons report she'd seen months ago on the local news. Block 2. Hidden Truths. Ruby Mason couldn't shake the feeling that she'd seen Lisa Winters before. As she refilled coffee cups around the diner, Her eyes kept drifting to the booth in the corner where Lisa sat with Max, surrounded by the protective presence of Bear and his friends. Something about the woman's face, even beneath the bruises, tugged at Ruby's memory. It wasn't until she stepped into the back office to grab more napkins that it clicked. Pinned to the community bulletin board was a faded missing persons flyer, one of many that Rusty insisted on keeping up, just in case. Ruby stared at the smiling woman in the photo. Younger, healthier, but unmistakably Lisa Winters. Except the name on the flyer wasn't Lisa Gilbert, or even Lisa Winters. It read, "Missing, Caroline Reynolds, age 32, last seen in Portland, Oregon." Ruby's hands trembled as she unpinned the flyer. The date showed Caroline Reynolds had disappeared 18 months ago. According to the small print, she had vanished after testifying in a criminal case, taking her young son with her. No foul play was suspected. But her family was desperate for news. Back in the diner, Max had fallen asleep with his head in his mother's lap, emotionally exhausted from the day's events. Lisa stroked his hair gently, her swollen fingers moving with maternal tenderness despite her obvious pain. Officer Jessica Chen had returned from the motel with Lisa's belongings, a single duffel bag containing everything she and Max owned. "We've got Ray and his cousin in custody," Officer Chen informed the group quietly. "They'll be arraigned in the morning. Given Ray's prior record and your injuries, I don't think he'll make bail this time." "Prior record?" Bear questioned, his eyebrows rising. Officer Chen nodded. 2 previous domestic violence charges in Nevada, plus an outstanding warrant for assault in Arizona. "He's looking at serious time." Lisa's face remained impassive, but her fingers stilled in Max's hair. "Do you have somewhere safe to go, Mrs. Gilbert?" Chen asked. "Family or friends nearby?" Before Lisa could answer, Ruby approached the table, clutching the flyer behind her back. She caught Lisa's eye, and something unspoken passed between the two women. A flash of recognition, then fear in Lisa's gaze. "She can stay with me," Ruby offered. "I've got a spare room above the diner. It's nothing fancy, but it's private." Bear nodded approvingly. "That's a good idea. At least until you figure out your next steps." "I couldn't impose," Lisa began, her voice still raspy from Ray's assault. "It's not an imposition," Ruby insisted, then added pointedly, "Sometimes people need a fresh start, no questions asked." Lisa studied Ruby's face for a long moment, before giving a slight nod. "Thank you. Just for a night or two." As the diner began to empty, Bear and his crew prepared to leave as well. The road warriors had a reputation to maintain after all, and lingering too long at a family diner wasn't part of their usual image. But before departing, Bear crouched next to the booth where Max had awoken and was sleepily finishing his cookie. "You did good today, kid," Bear said softly. "Real good. Not many grown men would have had the guts to do what you did." Max looked up at the intimidating biker, his young face serious. "My mom says sometimes the scariest-looking people have the kindest hearts." Bear chuckled, a deep rumble that seemed to start from his boots. "Your mom sounds pretty smart." He pulled out a business card with the Road Warriors emblem and a phone number scrawled on the back. "If you or your mom need anything at all, you call this number. Someone will answer, day or night." Max accepted the card reverently, treating it like a sheriff's badge. "Are you guys really warriors?" "In our own way," Bear replied with a wink. "Take care of your mom now." As the bikers filed out of the diner, Ruby helped Lisa upstairs to the modest apartment. It was a simple space. 1 bedroom, a pull-out couch in the living area, a kitchenette, and a bathroom that had seen better days, but it was clean and secure. More importantly, the building's back entrance had a solid deadbolt, and Ruby's late husband had installed security cameras that still functioned. Once Max was settled on the couch watching cartoons, Ruby led Lisa to the bedroom and closed the door. Without a word, she handed over the missing persons flyer. Lisa sank onto the edge of the bed, her fingers tracing the photograph. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "It came in a packet from the state police about a year ago," Ruby explained. "Rusty posts all of them. I recognized you as soon as I got a good look." She hesitated, then asked, "Are you in some kind of trouble, Caroline?" Lisa, or Caroline, flinched at the sound of her real name. "It's complicated," she said finally, "and dangerous. The less you know, the better." Ruby crossed her arms. "Well, I already know you're not Lisa Gilbert, or even Lisa Winters. And I know you've been running from something bigger than just an abusive husband." She softened her stance. "I'm not looking to cause you problems, honey. But if I'm harboring you, I deserve to know if there's danger coming to my door." Caroline looked up, her good eye filled with tears. "Ray wasn't supposed to find us. We've been moving every few months, changing our names, staying off the grid. I thought we were safe in Pinewood." She swallowed hard. "I never meant to bring trouble here. What are you running from? The law?" Caroline shook her head vehemently. "No, I'm running from a man named Victor Hargrove. He's a businessman in Portland, real estate mostly, but his actual business is much darker." Ruby sat down beside her, the mattress dipping under their combined weight. "Go on." "I was his accountant," Caroline explained. "I discovered he was using his properties to launder money for a drug trafficking operation. When I realized what was happening, I went to the FBI. Ruby's eyes widened. "You were an informant?" "I testified against some of his associates. They were convicted, but Victor himself walked free. His lawyers were too good, the evidence too circumstantial." Caroline's voice dropped to a whisper. "The night after the trial, 2 men broke into my apartment. I was working late. Only Max was home with the sitter. They didn't find what they were looking for, but the message was clear." She looked Ruby directly in the eye. "Victor wouldn't stop until I was silenced, and he recovered the evidence I still had against him." "What evidence?" Caroline shook her head. "It's hidden. Somewhere safe. It's my insurance policy, the only thing keeping us alive. If Victor thought I didn't have it anymore, we'd already be dead." Ruby exhaled slowly, processing this information. "And Ray? Where does he fit in all this?" "Ray was a mistake," Caroline admitted, shame coloring her voice. "I met him 6 months after we went into hiding. He seemed kind at first, protective. I thought Max needed a father figure. I was so tired of being alone and afraid." Her fingers brushed her swollen eye. "By the time I realized who Ray really was, he had control of our money, our ID documents. He made sure we couldn't leave." Outside the bedroom, Max had crept away from the television and stood listening at the door, his small face scrunched in concentration as he tried to make sense of the muffled voices. He'd known they were running from bad men. His mom had always been honest about that, but he'd never known the whole story. He returned to the couch when he heard the women's voices growing louder, pretending to be absorbed in his cartoon when they emerged. "I should leave Pinewood," Caroline said as they rejoined Max. "If Ray talks, if he mentions us to the wrong person, you need rest first," Ruby insisted. "Both of you. One night won't make a difference. We'll figure things out in the morning." Across town, Ray Gilbert sat in an interrogation room at the Pinewood police station, his face a mask of controlled rage. Officer Crawford sat across from him, reviewing the charges. Domestic assault, battery, false imprisonment, probation violation, Crawford read from the file. Plus the outstanding warrant from Arizona. "You're looking at serious time, Ray." Ray leaned forward, his eyes calculating. "Maybe we can help each other out." Crawford scoffed. "Not interested in making deals. That's the DA's job." "What if I told you Lisa Gilbert isn't who she claims to be?" Ray said, a sly smile spreading across his face. "What if I told you she's a fugitive with a price on her head? A big one?" Crawford's expression remained impassive, but his interest was piqued. "Go on." "Her real name is Caroline Reynolds. She's wanted by some very powerful people in Portland. I was hired to find her." Ray leaned back, satisfied with the revelation. "Check it out if you don't believe me. Missing persons report filed 18 months ago. But trust me, the people looking for her aren't concerned about her welfare. They want what she took from them, and what would that be?" Crawford asked. Ray shrugged. "Above my pay grade. I just track and report. But I know the reward for finding her is $50,000. Could be yours instead of mine. All you have to do is make these charges disappear, and I'll split it with you." Crawford stood up, disgust evident on his face. "You're facing felony charges? And you're trying to bribe a police officer? That's a bold strategy." He headed for the door. "Enjoy your night in lockup, Ray. The DA will see you in the morning." But as Crawford walked away, his mind was racing. Caroline Reynolds. He'd check the name, of course, standard procedure. But what if Ray was telling the truth about the reward? $50,000 was life-changing money in a town like Pinewood. And technically, If this woman was indeed a fugitive, bringing her in would just be doing his job. Morning brought a sense of tentative peace to Ruby's apartment. Caroline, having slept in a real bed without fear for the first time in months, looked marginally better. The swelling in her face had subsided slightly, though the bruising had darkened to a deep purple. Max, resilient as only children can be, was helping Ruby make pancakes in the kitchenette, standing on a chair to reach the counter. "You flip it when the bubbles pop," Ruby instructed, guiding his hand with the spatula. "That's it. Perfect," Max beamed with pride as he successfully flipped a pancake. "Mom, look, I did it." Caroline watched from the doorway, a complex mix of emotions washing over her face. Love for her son, gratitude toward Ruby, and the ever-present undercurrent of fear. "That looks delicious, honey." The peaceful domestic scene was interrupted by a heavy knock at the door. Caroline froze, her body tensing automatically. Ruby put a protective arm around Max. "Stay here," Ruby told them, moving cautiously to the door. She checked the peephole and visibly relaxed. "It's just Bear." She opened the door to find not only Bear, but also Diesel and Hawk, all three looking oddly formal in clean t-shirts beneath their leather vests. "Morning, Ruby," Bear greeted, removing his sunglasses. "Hope we're not intruding." "Not at all. We're just making breakfast." Ruby stepped aside to let them enter. "Coffee?" "Please," Diesel replied, following Bear inside while Hawk remained by the door, his stance casual but his eyes alert. Bear nodded a greeting to Caroline, his expression softening at the sight of her injuries. "How are you holding up?" "Better," she answered cautiously. "Thank you again for yesterday. No thanks needed." Bear accepted a mug of coffee from Ruby. "Actually, we came because we might have a problem. Vince has a cousin who works dispatch at the police station. Word is, Ray's been running his mouth all night, claiming you're not who you say you are." Caroline paled, her fingers gripping the countertop for support. "He also tried to bribe Officer Crawford," Bear continued. "Mentioned something about a reward for finding you. Crawford shut him down, but he left the implication hanging. But police are human, and $50,000 is a lot of money." Caroline finished grimly. Bear nodded. "Crawford's a good cop, but he's got 3 kids in college and a mountain of debt. I wouldn't count on him forgetting what Ray told him." Max had abandoned his pancake duties and stood beside his mother, sensing her distress. "Are the bad men from Portland coming?" he asked quietly. The adults exchanged surprised glances. "You know about that?" Caroline asked her son. Max nodded solemnly. "I heard you and Ruby talking about the evidence in Victor." Caroline closed her eyes briefly, torn between regret that her son knew more than she'd intended, and pride at his perceptiveness. "Yes, baby. If Ray told the police who we really are, the bad men might come looking for us. Then we should leave," Max said with the simple logic of a child. "We always leave when it gets dangerous." Bear cleared his throat. "Actually, I've got another idea. Ray's in custody, but his cousin Dale made bail this morning. If he reaches out to these people in Portland, you need to be somewhere they won't look for you." He exchanged glances with Diesel. "The Road Warriors have a compound about 40 miles north of here. It's secure, private property. No one gets in without our say-so." Caroline shook her head. "I couldn't possibly." "Just for a few days," Bear insisted. "Until we figure out if Ray's claims are being taken seriously. The last place anyone would look for a woman and her son is at a motorcycle club compound." Ruby nodded encouragingly. "It's a good plan, Caroline." The sound of her real name spoken so casually made Caroline flinch, but she didn't correct Ruby. Instead, she looked to Max, who was watching Bear with undisguised admiration. "Do you have motorcycles at your compound?" the boy asked eagerly. Bear chuckled. "About 30 of them, kid. And if your mom says it's okay, I might even let you sit on one." The decision was made in the space of a heartbeat. Caroline knew the rhythm of running by now, the familiar surge of adrenaline, the mental calculations of what to take and what to leave behind, the accepting that safety today meant upheaval again. But this time felt different. For once, they weren't running alone. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Now," Bear replied. "Pack what you need. We've got everything else covered." The Road Warriors compound was nothing like Caroline had imagined. Instead of the lawless den of chaos depicted in movies, she found a surprisingly orderly community set on 20 acres of forested land. A tall security fence surrounded the property, with cameras mounted at strategic points. The main building was a renovated barn that served as a clubhouse, with smaller cabins scattered throughout the woods. "It's not the Ritz," Bear explained as he led Caroline and Max toward one of the cabins, "but it's clean and safe. This was my daughter's place before she moved to Seattle." Caroline paused, surprised. "You have a daughter?" Bear's weathered face softened. "Marissa. She's 32, works as an emergency room nurse." Pride colored his voice. "She never had much use for the club life, but she visits when she can." The cabin was simple but comfortable. One bedroom, a small living area with a wood stove, and a kitchenette. Photographs lined the walls, showing a younger Bear with a dark-haired woman and a little girl with her father's eyes. "Diana, my late wife," Bear explained when he caught Caroline studying the photos. "Cancer took her 15 years ago." "I'm sorry," Caroline said softly, recognizing the lingering pain in his voice. It was strange to reconcile this gentle, grieving father with the intimidating biker who had burst into her motel room. Max had already claimed a spot on the window seat, peering out at the compound where club members went about their business. Several women moved between buildings, some carrying laundry, others working in a large communal garden. "Who are they?" Max asked. "Wives, girlfriends, sisters," Bear replied. "Some are members themselves. The Road Warriors might look rough, but we're a family. Everyone contributes, everyone benefits." He headed for the door. "Get settled in. Dinner's at the main hall at 6. Diesel's wife, Connie, makes the best fried chicken in 3 counties. After Bear left, Caroline sank onto the edge of the bed, the reality of their situation finally catching up with her. They were fugitives hiding with a motorcycle club. If someone had described this scenario to her 3 years ago, when she was still a respected accountant with a corner office and a 401k, she would have laughed in disbelief. "Mom?" Max sat beside her, his small hand finding hers. "Are we going to be okay?" Caroline squeezed his hand, marveling at his resilience. "Yes, baby. We're going to be fine. I like Bear," Max declared. "He reminds me of Grandpa." Caroline smiled sadly, thinking of her father who had passed away before all this began. "He does have that same dependable quality, doesn't he?" Meanwhile, back in Pinewood, Officer Mike Crawford sat in his patrol car outside the police station, staring at his cell phone. The name Caroline Reynolds had indeed produced a missing persons report, just as Ray had claimed. But Crawford had dug deeper, making calls to contacts in Portland. What he discovered had left him uneasy. The official story was that Caroline Reynolds had disappeared after testifying in a money laundering case. The unofficial story, whispered by a detective who'd had too many drinks at a law enforcement conference, was that Caroline had been a key witness against Victor Hargrove, one of Portland's most influential developers. Hargrove had walked free, but 3 of his associates went to prison based partly on Caroline's testimony. She had more evidence, the detective had confided, stuff that never made it to court. Hargrove's people have been looking for her ever since. "There's a reward. Off the books." Crawford had a mortgage, 3 kids in college, and a wife with chronic health problems insurance barely covered. $50,000 would solve a lot of problems. But as he sat in his car, finger hovering over the call button, Crawford couldn't shake the image of Max's terrified face as he ran across that parking lot. With a heavy sigh, Crawford deleted the number and started his engine. Some lines weren't meant to be crossed, no matter how tempting the other side looked. What Crawford didn't know was that Dale Gilbert, released on bail that morning, had already made a call from a payphone outside Pinewood. The number had connected him to a nondescript office building in downtown Portland, where a secretary had efficiently taken down his information and promised someone would be in touch. That someone was currently driving toward Pinewood, a slender man named Eli Parker, who served as Victor Hargrove's personal fixer. Eli didn't look dangerous in his pressed chinos and button-down shirt, but the cold calculation in his eyes told a different story. He'd been hunting Caroline Reynolds for 18 months, following whispers and false leads across 3 states. Sitting in the passenger seat of Eli's Audi was Dale Gilbert, nervously fiddling with the air conditioning vent. "So you're sure it was her?" Eli asked, his voice conversational but his attention laser-focused. "Caroline Reynolds?" "Ray said it was," Dale replied. "She's calling herself Lisa Gilbert now. Took Ray's last name when they got married. But yeah, he's positive. Said the kid matches too. Right age, right look. And where are they now?" Dale shifted uncomfortably. "That's the thing. After the cops took us in, some bikers showed up at the diner where the kid ran to. Road Warriors MC. Ray thinks they might have helped her skip town." Eli's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Bikers," he muttered. "Wonderful." At the Road Warriors compound, the evening brought an unexpected moment of normality. The main hall, a large open space with picnic-style tables and a commercial kitchen, filled with club members and their families. Children darted between tables, women carried in dishes of food, and men argued good-naturedly about motorcycles and sports. Caroline and Max sat at a table with Bear, Diesel, and his wife Connie, and an older woman everyone called Mama Jo, who apparently served as the club's unofficial matriarch. Connie's fried chicken lived up to its reputation, and Max ate with the uninhibited enthusiasm of childhood, his face smeared with honey from the cornbread. "He's a good eater," Connie observed approvingly, sliding another piece onto Max's plate. In her 50s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair, Connie had a maternal warmth that immediately put Caroline at ease. "He's always had a healthy appetite," Caroline replied, watching her son with a mix of love and amazement. Children were so adaptable, one day running from danger, the next happily feasting among strangers who had become protectors. After dinner, as the adults lingered over coffee, Bear received a phone call that drew him outside. When he returned, his expression was grim. "That was Ruby," he told Caroline quietly. "Dale Gilbert's been released, and he's been asking questions around town about you. Specifically about whether anyone knew where you and Max went." Caroline's momentary sense of security evaporated. "We should leave. Now, if Dale connects me to you, let him try," Bear interrupted. "This compound is secure. Besides, running now would just make you more visible. Better to stay put and let things cool down." Caroline wasn't convinced, but the alternative, hitting the road again with Max, no destination and limited resources, seemed equally daunting. Mama Jo, sensing the tension, approached their table with a well-timed distraction. "Max, honey, we're about to have dessert. There's homemade ice cream in the kitchen. Want to help me scoop it?" Max looked to his mother for permission. At her nod, he eagerly followed Mama Jo, leaving the adults to their serious conversation. "There's something you should know," Caroline said once Max was out of earshot. "The men looking for me, they're dangerous. Not just garden-variety criminals. If Victor Hargrove discovers I'm here, he won't come alone, and he won't care who gets hurt in the process." "We've dealt with dangerous men before," Diesel replied, his calm demeanor belied by the intensity in his eyes. "The Road Warriors didn't earn their reputation by backing down from fights." Connie shot her husband a sharp look. "This isn't about reputation, you blockhead. It's about keeping a woman and her child safe." She turned to Caroline. "Don't mind the testosterone, they mean well, but sometimes they forget not everything is solved with fists and firearms." Bear ignored the jab. "We have safeguards in place, security systems, regular patrols. No one gets in or out without us knowing. But Caroline, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Who is Victor Hargrove, and what does he want from you?" Caroline hesitated, weighing her options. For 18 months, she'd guarded her secrets carefully, trusting no one, but these people had risked their safety for hers, had opened their community to her and Max. If anyone deserved the truth, they did. "Victor Hargrove launders money for a drug trafficking network," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I worked for him for 5 years as his chief financial officer. I thought his business was legitimate, high-end real estate development. But I started noticing discrepancies in the accounts." She took a deep breath. "When I brought them to Victor's attention, thinking they were errors, his response made it clear they weren't mistakes at all. He offered me a choice: join the operation with a substantial raise, or have an accident." "So you went to the authorities," Diesel surmised. Caroline nodded. "The FBI was building a case against the drug network. I became their informant, For 6 months, I gathered evidence, account numbers, transaction records, communications. But Victor is careful. The case against him personally wasn't strong enough. His lawyers got him off while his associates took the fall. And the evidence? Bear asked. Ray told the police you still have something Hargrove wants. A backup. Caroline confirmed. Insurance in case Victor ever found me. Everything the FBI didn't get. Connections to corrupt officials, offshore accounts, blackmail material. Enough to put Victor away for decades. Where is it? Connie asked. Caroline met her gaze steadily. The less you know, the safer you are. Back in Pinewood, Ruby Mason was locking up the diner when a sleek black Audi pulled into the parking lot. A well-dressed man emerged, his pleasant smile at odds with his cold eyes. Sorry, we're closed, Ruby called, keys in hand. I'm not here for food, ma'am, the man replied, approaching with measured steps. My name is Eli Parker. I'm looking for someone. A woman named Caroline Reynolds. She might be using another name now. I'm a private investigator hired by her family. They're very worried about her. Ruby's expression remained neutral, but her grip on her keys tightened. Don't know anyone by that name. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's been a long day. Eli's smile didn't falter. Perhaps you know her as Lisa. She has a son, about 8 years old. I understand there was some trouble here yesterday involving her husband. Lots of tourists pass through, Ruby replied evenly. I don't keep track. Eli reached into his jacket, producing a business card and a photograph of Caroline and Max. If you happen to see her, I'd appreciate a call. Her parents are elderly and in poor health. They just want to know she's safe. Ruby accepted the card without looking at it. I'll keep an eye out, she promised, knowing she would do no such thing. As Eli returned to his car, Ruby pulled out her cell phone and dialed Bear's number. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 3 days passed at the Road Warriors compound with no sign of trouble. Caroline began to breathe easier, watching Max flourish in the unexpected freedom and safety of their temporary haven. Bear had kept his promise about the motorcycles, allowing Max to sit on his parked Harley while teaching him about the different parts. The boy soaked up the attention like a sponge, trailing after Bear and the other bikers, asking endless questions that they answered with surprising patience. For Caroline, the respite from constant vigilance was both welcome and disorienting. After 18 months of looking over her shoulder, the compound's secure perimeter and watchful guardians gave her the first real rest she'd had since fleeing Portland. She found herself helping Connie in the communal kitchen, the familiar rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring pots soothing in its normalcy. You've got good knife skills, Connie observed as Caroline expertly diced onions without a tear in sight. Professional training? Caroline smiled. My father was a chef. He insisted I learn my way around a kitchen before I left for college. Said even accountants need to eat. Accountant, Connie repeated thoughtfully. Hard to reconcile that with the woman on the run I see now. Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself, Caroline admitted. 3 years ago, my biggest worry was making partner at my firm. Their conversation was interrupted by Max bursting through the door, his face flushed with excitement. Mom, Bear's teaching me how to change a tire. Come see. As Caroline followed her son outside, she caught sight of a familiar truck pulling through the compound's gate, Ruby's ancient Ford pickup. Bear met the waitress as she parked, his expression growing serious as she spoke to him in low, urgent tones. Caroline's momentary peace evaporated when Bear's eyes found hers across the yard, his grim nod confirming her fears. Stay with Diesel, she told Max, pressing a quick kiss to his forehead before joining Bear and Ruby. We've got trouble, Ruby said without preamble. A man came to the diner looking for you. Said his name was Eli Parker. Claimed to be a PI hired by your family. Caroline felt the blood drain from her face. Eli Parker is Victor Hargrove's right-hand man. He's the one who threatened me after the trial. Her hands began to shake. If he's in Pinewood, it's only a matter of time before he traces us here. Bear's expression hardened. Let him try. This compound has withstood visits from ATF, FBI, and rival clubs. One corporate thug doesn't worry me. You don't understand, Caroline insisted. Victor won't send just Eli. He'll bring professionals, ex-military types he uses for his special problems. They won't care who gets hurt. Ruby touched Caroline's arm gently. There's more. Officer Crawford came by the diner this morning. He was asking questions about you too, but different ones. He wanted to know if you were safe, if Max was okay. She paused. I think he's trying to help in his way. He mentioned that Ray made bail this morning. Both Ray and Dale are out now? Bear growled. Perfect. Caroline paced the gravel driveway, her mind racing. The circle was tightening. With Ray and Dale free, with Eli in town asking questions, it was only a matter of time before her location was compromised. The road warriors were formidable, but they weren't prepared for the kind of force Victor might bring to bear. I need to leave, she decided. Tonight, it's too dangerous for me to stay here. And go where? Bear demanded. You've been running for 18 months. How long can you keep it up? What kind of life is that for the boy? The question struck Caroline like a physical blow. Max had already lost so much, his home, his friends, his sense of stability. Every time they fled to a new town, adopted new names, she watched a little piece of his childhood slip away. What's the alternative? She asked quietly. I can't let Victor find me. I can't let him hurt Max. Bear exchanged glances with Ruby. Maybe it's time to stop running, he suggested. Time to take the fight to them instead. Caroline stared at him in disbelief. You want me to confront Victor Hargrove? The man has connections everywhere. Police, judges, politicians. That's why the FBI couldn't get him the first time. Not confront, Bear clarified. Expose. You said you have evidence, enough to put him away. What if we helped you use it? The idea was both terrifying and tempting. Caroline had carried the weight of that evidence for so long, the backup drive hidden where no one would think to look. It was her insurance policy, her last resort. Using it meant giving up her final leverage against Victor, but keeping it hidden meant continuing to run, continuing to live in fear. I need to think about this, she said finally. As night fell over the compound, Caroline sat on the porch of their borrowed cabin, watching Max sleep through the window. The boy had exhausted himself playing with the other children, his face peaceful in slumber. One arm wrapped around a teddy bear Mama Jo had given him. Bear joined her on the porch, offering a cup of coffee which she accepted gratefully. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sounds of the forest surrounding them. Crickets chirping, an occasional hoot of an owl, the distant rumble of motorcycles as members returned from town. Whatever you decide, Bear said finally, we've got your back. All of us. Caroline studied his weathered face in the porch light. Why? You barely know me. Bear considered the question. When Max ran into that parking lot, he could have gone anywhere for help. Could have run to the police station down the street. Could have gone into any business. But something made him run to a bunch of scary-looking bikers instead. He smiled faintly. Kids got good instincts. Recognize that sometimes the ones society labels as dangerous are the ones who'll fight hardest to protect the innocent. A motorcycle engine grew louder, and Hawk emerged from the darkness, pulling up to the cabin with unusual haste. Bear, he called, cutting his engine. We've got visitors at the gate. 2 black SUVs, professional types asking to speak with whoever's in charge. Bear was on his feet instantly. Get everyone to the main hall, he ordered. Secure protocol. Caroline's heart pounded as she rushed inside to wake Max. The boy blinked sleepily as she bundled him into his jacket. What's happening, Mom? We need to go to the main building, she explained, keeping her voice calm despite her racing pulse. It's just a precaution. The compound had transformed in the span of minutes. Women and children were being escorted to the main hall, while members took defensive positions, weapons appearing from hidden caches. Caroline clutched Max's hand as they hurried across the yard, guided by Connie. Inside the main hall, Mama Jo was organizing the children into a back room, her gentle efficiency masking the seriousness of the situation. Come on, little ones. We're having an impromptu slumber party in the game room. Who wants hot chocolate? As the children followed Mama Jo, Caroline knelt before Max. Go with Mama Jo, baby. I'll be right here when you get back. Max searched her face, suddenly looking older than his years. The bad men are here, aren't they? Caroline couldn't bring herself to lie. Some men are at the gate. Bear and the others are handling it. Don't leave me. Max whispered, fear creeping into his voice. Never, Caroline promised, hugging him tightly before releasing him to Mama Jo's care. Once the children were secured, Caroline joined Bear and Diesel at the window. Through the trees, she could see the main gate illuminated by security lights. 2 black SUVs idled outside, a group of men in dark clothing standing in a loose formation. Even from this distance, she recognized Eli Parker's slim figure, flanked by larger men whose stances suggested military training. 8 men that I can see, Diesel reported, armed, trying to be subtle about it. Bear nodded grimly. Vince and Hawk are on the perimeter, everyone else is in position, and Caroline's chest tightened with guilt and fear. This was her fight, yet these people were putting themselves at risk for her. If anyone was hurt because of her... A vehicle approached from the main road, a police cruiser with its lights flashing but siren silent. It pulled up behind the SUVs, and Officer Mike Crawford stepped out, his hand resting cautiously on his holstered weapon. Interesting, Bear murmured. Seems Officer Crawford is taking an interest in our visitors. Through the compound's exterior speakers, they could hear the conversation at the gate. This is private property, Crawford was saying to Eli. You mind telling me what business you have here at this hour? Eli's reply was smooth, practiced. We're looking for a fugitive, officer. A woman named Caroline Reynolds, wanted in connection with a theft in Portland. We have reason to believe she's hiding here. You have a warrant? Crawford asked. We're private security, contracted by the victim, Eli explained. We're simply here to talk. Armed private security showing up at a motorcycle club compound after dark doesn't look like simply talking to me, Crawford observed. I suggest you gentlemen leave and come back during daylight hours. Through proper channels, the standoff at the gate continued, tension crackling in the air. Caroline made her decision. I need to end this, she said quietly. Not just tonight, but for good. Bear turned to her. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to use my insurance policy. Caroline squared her shoulders. The evidence against Victor is on a flash drive. It's been hidden in plain sight all this time. Inside Max's teddy bear, the one he never lets out of his sight. Bear's eyes widened slightly. Smart. I need to get that drive to the right people, Caroline continued. Not local police. They could be compromised. Federal agents and journalists from multiple outlets. People Victor can't silence or buy off. I might know someone who can help with that, Ruby offered. My nephew works for the Seattle Tribune. He's been trying to break into investigative journalism. A story this big would make his career. Caroline nodded, a plan forming. I also need to speak with Officer Crawford. If he's here of his own accord, trying to help rather than harm us, he might be an ally. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. While Bear maintained the standoff at the gate, keeping Eli and his men at bay with the help of Officer Crawford, Caroline prepared for what came next. The flash drive, retrieved from Max's teddy bear, was copied multiple times. Ruby called her nephew, who was already driving to Pinewood, eager for the story of his career. Diesel arranged secure transport for Caroline and Max to Seattle, where they would remain under the protection of Bear's daughter Marissa until the situation resolved. Just before dawn, Caroline stood at the compound's side entrance, Max asleep in the back of Connie's SUV. The main gate standoff continued, with Eli and his men refusing to leave but unable to enter, while Crawford maintained his position as reluctant peacekeeper. Bear embraced Caroline, this woman who had started as a stranger in need, and become something like family in just a few short days. You sure about this plan? Caroline nodded. It's time to stop running. Time to fight back the right way. She looked toward the vehicle where her son slept. Max deserves a real life, not one spent always looking over his shoulder. As the morning sun crested the trees, Caroline Reynolds and her son slipped away from the compound, carrying with them not just the evidence that would bring down Victor Hargrove, but also the knowledge that they were no longer alone in their fight. 3 weeks later, the front page of the Seattle Tribune carried the headline, Real estate mogul Victor Hargrove indicted on multiple federal charges. Accompanying the article was a photograph of Hargrove being led from his office in handcuffs, his empire crumbling around him. In a small apartment in Seattle, Caroline and Max Winters, their true surname reclaimed at last, celebrated with Bear, Ruby, and their unlikely family of protectors. The journey wasn't over, with trials and testimony still to come. But for the first time in years, their path led toward home rather than away from it, and it had all begun with a desperate little boy, running toward the most unexpected of heroes.